Well, Frank Tramble, Michigan State University alumnus and former Michigan State University employee, is the new Vice President for Communications and Marketing and Public Affairs at Duke University. And it's great to welcome Frank to MSU today. Hello, Frank.
Hey, thanks, Russ. I'm so happy to be home, back in my original building where it all started.
I love it. Well, congratulations on the new role. And before we talk a bit about it, a little bit of your background between graduating from MSU and now being at Duke.
Yeah, thank you. So, after graduating from Michigan State, I actually went off to work for Enterprise as training to be a branch manager there, and was really excited to go into, the for-profit side, if you will, and to start going into corporate America. And then I was there every single day missing what I had at Michigan State at the time. And it just so happened that Charles Jackson, who used to be in the MSU Annual Fund, gave me a call and said, hey, that program you were a student in, how about you come back and run it? And for me, I was like, you know what? I think I just felt like a calling to come back. And I spent so much of my undergraduate experience being wound up in that program and missing it that it just seemed like the great opportunity to come back to. After that, I stayed at Michigan State for the next 7 years or so, and then decided to change and go to a new route, a new career, and then went over to Georgetown University, where I headed their marketing and communications for their annual fund in the medical school or the medical center, and then kind of just stayed there for then again the next 7 years or so. Picked up and started teaching at Georgetown in the graduate program. Also went off before that and got a graduate degree in integrated marketing communications. And then got a call one day saying that Howard University was looking at me. And that always felt like a calling, too, for a whole lot of reasons we can get into. And then went over to Howard University, and some years later now at Duke.
Take me back when you were ready to choose a college. Why was MSU the place for you? And a little bit about how it impacted you, prepared you for where you are, and maybe some of the people along the way that impacted you most.
Yeah. Well, there are two schools there's one school that I really wanted to go to. It actually was Howard University, and it was, part of my fabric going to an HBCU, and my family was, my father used to actually work for a lot of the HBCUs repairing their instruments, so I always kind of had it in my mind that I wanted to go to Howard. Financially, that wasn't going to work out the way that I wanted it to. And I remember doing a program with University of Michigan, and I had acceptance from both University of Michigan and Michigan State at the time. And I started to just kind of wonder, I kind of grew up a Michigan fan because I was in the Detroit area. I didn't know as much about Michigan State just because sports-wise, that was all I was really seeing. And then, I did this program, and I remember being in a place where the teacher said, hey, well, everyone, this is a group project. Everyone's going to Michigan in this kind of group. So everyone do this group project or this project, and you can ask people around and, just see how it goes. So she leaves the room, and then we're all kind of doing our assignments. And I honestly struggled a little bit with one of those, questions. And so I reach over and try to ask someone, what do you get for this? Or can you help with this? And they turn their back to me. Then I reached over to the next person and said, well, what about you? And they turned their back to me. And I felt like it was such a weird experience because the whole idea was, if you had a question, ask someone around you. Fast forward to me experiencing, some of the Spartans. And it was much more of a scenario where there was like, well, you have a question? Let's all come together and help you. And it was from that moment on, I realized I got to be a Spartan. And that kind of changed really the trajectory of like who I felt like I wanted to be. And, connecting with that Spartan will piece, it just kind of led the ground for why I knew I wanted to come to Michigan State.
How funny, Frank, how sometimes just those little moments can crystallize a whole lifetime. And that's a cool story. Well, Frank Tramble, let's go back to Duke. You're now the Vice President for Communications, Marketing, and Public Affairs. A little bit about the role, and like I asked you, what attracted you to that role, this role now?
So, I'm very passionate about the roles I take. I'm very authentic in trying to I always said, I started here as an MSU telemarketer, and I can say I have the skills to sell gutters to someone who doesn't own a home. It doesn't mean I want to. And so I have to be connected with the mission. I got to be connected with the program. And Duke in particular, for one, I'm the first vice president of communications, marketing, and public affairs. And I say that because the role for the last 35 years that I know of was public affairs and government relations. It really wasn't about marketing or branding and kind of telling the stories, more about managing the public affairs of the university and then really the government relations side. And for me, that was interesting when they wanted to change the role to be more branding and marketing, because for me, my skill set is actually in integrated marketing communications. It's the world of blending the communications and the public affairs side in with marketing and storytelling. I think early on, there really was always this kind of divide at many universities where marketing was something very separate, or you may not even did marketing in that sense, and you really just worried about media. And for me, that's an intertwined world. And when Duke called about that job, and I started really looking into the president, Vince Price, who's great, and this new administration he was putting together since 2017, what I saw was a highly selective university who was really trying to change the fabric of their story and really showcase something that I hadn't seen even as a person of color at these highly selective schools. As of July 1st, there are more people of color on the president's cabinet than at this school than I've seen at any highly selective school. The athletic director is a black woman. It's the first black woman to be an athletic director and in the Power 5 conference, any Power 5 conference. The head of HR is a person of color. You got myself. You have, our chief diversity officer. You have our community affairs VP. And so our provost, who is a brand new and just came from University of Michigan and has spent many years there, another person of color. So for me, there was a story that was building at Duke that was so exciting to kind of come in and be the inaugural piece to be able to tell that. And I think also, I've told this story to a lot of our Duke friends too. I've only knew about Duke from basketball. We know the Izzo and Coach K rivalry. Right. And for me, that's all we knew. When I stepped foot on Duke's campus, the people are so welcoming and helpful. And that same feeling I got when I was at Michigan State and someone saying, hey, together we can build this, together we can help, together we can grow, I felt that at Duke. And so to have such a different opinion because I only knew the sports and to see what's actually happening on the ground, I just felt like it was another connection point for me to be the one to help and come and tell that story and to help people to see behind just what we know from sports.
Yeah. What about some short-term goals as you get started, maybe some longer ones if you've thought about them?
Yeah. Short-term goals right now is to get to know the university. We are walking into the 100th year for Duke. And so, that next year we're going to be celebrating 100 years of Duke and telling that story and redefining Duke. And I think what's really exciting is the opportunity to redefine Duke for the next 100 years and to say, who is it going to be? Who do we want to be, and what things do we stand on? And so with every longstanding university, there's, the past 100 years were never always that great. There's always some things we have to kind of work through in those spaces. But I know who we want to be for the future, and I think I'm excited about that portion of it. And I think long-term, being able to build that and being able to really bring together the university among the stories and then be able to hopefully change the perspective for some others too, for people really just understanding who Duke is today. I think that is so exciting for me. And then in particular too, I look forward to building a department that didn't exist before. Yeah. And being able to establish something that whenever I leave the university will be there long after me.
Frank Tramble, what would you say? I know we could have a conference on this, but some of the challenges facing Duke, MSU, really all of higher ed, and maybe some of the opportunities that can spring from that.
Higher education, it's in an interesting space now. It's more under attack than you'd ever think, especially for an industry that just serves to educate. Serve to bring equity to our communities, that our intrinsic missions are always to build who we are, build the students that come to us, and be able to give back to the world. And to be in an industry like that and almost feel like it's under attack all the time is a very new space, I think, for the higher education industry. And I think that's also where we look at even how politics are. Politics, the more that pendulum swings left and right, back and forth, farther and farther away, we still have campuses that are full of both individuals, and trying to find a space to remember that we're all in this America thing together. So we got to remember those aspects. So I think, again, it's a unique place to be right now, but where it's going to continue to grow for us, and where I think the most important parts of the decisions that we'll make is going to be in our storytelling, because prior to social media, what happened on a college campus is kind of only within the people that are on that campus. We always think about our alum. We always think about the people engaged, but honestly, the opinion of your campus and the opinion of your school is always going to be wider than just the people who are now interacting with it. I think that's one of the changes. And that's why I say some of the transparency and authenticity in your storytelling has to become much, much more expanded than it ever has before. And when you think of a MSU and you think of a Duke, we've got to make sure that the stories, the things that I know behind the walls of stepping foot on that campus is really understood by those who never will have an opportunity to step on our campuses. And I think that's where, where integrated marketing comes in. That's where these positions, you'll see a lot more VPs of communications and marketing, that those worlds blending together is kind of a critical place for where we go forward.
And Frank, you started to answer it, but how can strategic communications help address these issues?
Yeah, it's strategic communications overall, some may only consider it just the media side, but really strategic communications is understanding how do all of these things play together? How do the decisions we make emphasize and bring to life our moral values as an institution? Also, how can we be really open sometimes about while there is some confusions. We don't know all the answers every single time, and it's important for our communities to know that we're working toward that, and being able to communicate about those pieces. And so for as we think about strategic communications, we think about really integrated marketing communications. It is the source of being able to bring people into the room that may never be in the room. And that's really trying to align those spaces. I know when I was at Howard, a lot of the work that I did was trying to break down a wall between administration and students and faculty, to be able to break through some of the even conspiracies of what was happening in the room versus what was actually fact. I'll give you an example. Howard had a really bad relationship with its student newspaper for a long time. And when I got there, didn't have a great relationship either. But one of the things that I did right after that was I invited actually the editors into our department and to say, hey, come volunteer or work in our department and come and see what's happening, because what you'll find is that there's a lot of good people here trying to do their best work for you. And a lot of those conspiracies that you believe are happening aren't really happening, because the challenge is going to be faced to you, and help us find a solution for it. I spend a lot of my time trying to welcome people into the problem. Again, having that Spartan mentality of more people in the room will find the right answer together. And I feel like if we can do that, then we'll be in a much better place.
Yeah. And again, Frank, you've been talking about, but what's the relationship between strategic communications and marketing in today's world?
Yeah. So, I think of marketing or communications really as what are the messages that we need to share that help us understand who we are. It is the work of course, trying to make sure that we manage that in the media, where they control their own messaging, and we're trying to make sure we put out ours. But marketing is really the storytelling and the bringing to life that message past that point. So we can say we're these things, but how do we put it out there and make sure that we are, and that you understand it, that you see it past what's in the news? Where's the video content? Where's the branding on it? Where's the way that we can pull together everything in a visual and digital way that brings us to what we believe is truth? And a big part of that too is and this is where I think the world is different now than what it was. There once upon a time you could make a statement and say we are this thing, and then put it out there, and the community itself really couldn't talk to each other to say if you were or weren't. I think, nowadays, if you can say a statement and the people in your community believe that statement and connect with that statement, then that's when you really know you are those things. It's not just about who we say we are. It's about our actions. It's about everything that comes to life with that, and then being able to build that. And I think what's different nowadays, too, communications used to sit, kind of on the second tier of administration. It was, here are the decisions, and then let's go engage communications. And I think what has flipped on that side is there's been many situations that I've been in where communications is actually leading the decision making, trying to help our administrators understand, well, this decision means these things. It means that you're going to say this to the world. It means that here are the people are going to have an issue with that. It helps drive the conversation. I can't express the many times that I've stood there and we've grappled with a decision, and our team has gone and written something or pulled something together and said, well, here's what it looks like if we make this decision. And then that's really what pushes us over the line to make that decision. There's kind of an interesting space there where I will say I don't always agree with it for every scenario, but communication sometimes is driving that process, which also means as communicators, we have to be different. We can't just understand the communications and marketing side of it. We have to understand the business. We've got to understand, what's happening on finance. We've got to understand what's happening in student affairs. We have to be very dynamic because our solutions are going to be enacting whatever's happening at the university.
And Frank, when you're making some of these tough decisions, are there some guiding principles you rely on?
Oh, God, yes. For one, I go back to it, it's authenticity. I won't lie. I won't do things that morally I don't agree with, and I challenge our leaders to always be in that space because, I will never do that. It's just not who I am. I'll leave a job before I feel like I have to inauthentically communicate something that I morally just disagree with. But, for me, it's always about just staying calm. With strategic communications, I've gotten calls 2 a.m. that the world's on fire, and I'll tell you a quick story. Me and my wife, finally I got her out the country to celebrate our anniversary. We get out to Mexico, and I finally think we have this open space to just be us. I get a call from my boss saying, "Hey, I know you're in Mexico, but we just had a ransomware attack, and now you got to be on calls." And for the rest of that vacation, calls the entire time. And actually for the next 6 months, I spent, every 11 to 12 p.m., 2 a.m. calls, 6 a.m. calls, 3 a.m. calls in the morning, every single day for 7 days a week until we got things back on track. And so, it can be really challenging. But at the same time, you just got to stay calm. It's when you panic, when you forget your training, when you forget why you're doing the things that you do and keeping those things at the forefront of your mind, that you'll make mistakes. And while we can't be perfect, staying calm and being able to manage under pressure is probably the most important piece of advice I could ever give.
Yeah, well said, Frank. And speaking of advice, for the young people matriculating in this building we're sitting in now, the ComArts building at MSU, just sort of your advice for young people really in general, but maybe specifically for someone who wants to get into this communications world in some way.
Well, I have to speak Spartan specific first, which is the people in this building, the people on this campus, I owe so much to for, who I am today, why I do the things I do, how hard I go after the things I want, also the moral value I put into what I do. And that spirit, so I have to say, if you're here, you have to engage with the faculty and the staff that are here and really understand that there are people here that will give so much of themselves to you that will lead you into better pastures down the line. And so when I think about the fact that, Eric Thomas, who I know still is a part of this community, and when I was here was a faculty or staff member here, and going to his speeches every Friday or Thursday night or whatever it was, and hearing him talk about, motivation and why he's driven to do the things he does. I still hear those conversations every single day in my head. And granted, now he's a huge motivational speaker, so you can just go on Spotify and also check those things out too. But I knew him before that. And so that matters. You think of the Murray Edwards over in the Culture and Academic Transitions office and the Magic program and all of the wisdom he put into us. When you think about, I think about study abroad here and how that really, opened my world up to something completely different where, if I can safely say that if I didn't do the study abroad I did here with Dr. Hurong Lee, who is amazing, and him taking me over to Asia, I probably wouldn't be as qualified for the job I have now. And one of the first trips I've got to go over to is to China because we have campus there. So, it always ties back to how much or how involved you got with the community and how much you really can take those pieces in. Now, for anyone that's looking to get into this career, I think the hardest thing is with this generation is understand you got to still pay your dues. The one thing you have to do is be comfortable being uncomfortable. Early on in your career should be the time frame where you should be looking and say, what are all the things I'm not good at? and then you run toward those things. Don't just jog toward it, run toward it. If you don't think you're a good public speaker, you need to be standing on the corner doing public speaking every single day. You need to be the public speaker in your groups. You need to be able to bring your friends together and try to stand up in front of them and talk about things that you know. You need to run toward those things. I have built my entire life on being comfortable in the uncomfortable. And where did that start from? Here at Michigan State, because I was with a group called Bomb Squad that was a student group that we did what we called anthropological excursions, but really with the point of it was, what are you uncomfortable with? Let's go do it. And that was how I spent my freshman year. Us having conversations, what are you uncomfortable with? And then a group of people supporting me to go do that thing that I'm super uncomfortable with. So therefore, after a certain amount of time, what happens is you just don't get into scenarios where you're that uncomfortable because you've seen it before. You've challenged yourself in a different way. And I think that's just the best advice that I could ever give to someone, because you doing that sets you free from so many different things. And then now when I walk into a scenario where I haven't been in before, I just look at it and go, it's going to be a good story on the other side of that. I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but I know I can.
I love that. Frank Tramble, my guest on MSU today, MSU alumnus, who's now the Vice President for Communications, Marketing, and Public Affairs at Duke University. Frank, anything important I haven't asked you, or just some final thoughts you want to leave with us today?
Final thoughts. The Spartan community is just meant so much to me, and I can't, I almost see this as more of a thank you to the community, because there's so many people that I could go on with, and we could do a whole episode on naming those individuals. But from every office that I've ever been here at the university, this place can create a future for you if you let it, and if you embrace it, and if you really understand how to work within all the diversity of the community and be able to be to be involved, you'll find yourself as a new person, and always a Spartan.
Frank, great talking with you again. Thanks for coming in. Go green.
Go white.
That's Frank Tramble, Vice President for Communications, Marketing, and Public Affairs at Duke University. And I'm Russ White. This is